everyone, and welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan, also known as H.
I am Ryan Quintal, also known as Q.
Should have said my last name. That's the only thing that distinguishes us. That's okay.
That's fine. H and Q, we're here. We're back. The show must go on. I did it all for the nookie. What other popular phrases can we open with?
Famous phrases. Why do I lock up when things are asked of me?
It's all about the Benjamins.
Yeah, exactly. The most famous phrase.
That's right, yeah.
They aren't going to catch us riding dirty, no matter what they do.
Yes.
No matter how many people try to bring us down, they're not going to catch us riding dirty.
And I think you could probably tell if you're a long-time listener to Playwright, and I assume you are at this point. You're all our friends and family.
At least a minute and 27 worth.
That's right. We, H and Q, we're known for riding very, very clean. So when you see us riding, very clean riders, not dirty riders.
Like my favorite movie, Dirty Rider. So we can talk about that off air, I think.
All right, perfect.
Anyways, I should mention last week we had some recording difficulties. We were using Skype. So that's all that needs to be said about that. Skype just keeps on getting worse and worse every single time that we try to use it. And last week, it thought it would be funny to pick up the wrong mic. So you heard me as my webcam hears me and not as my Yeti microphone hears me. So I guess you can take that as like an empathic moment with the webcam. Like really, you can't judge a webcam until you walk a mile in its shoes. And I feel like we've all been through that together now. So I apologize for last week's audio. It sounded a little bit less than the pristine quality that we cultivate here on Playwright.
I think that first of all, you're allowed a mulligan, but second of all, anybody that listened a few weeks ago to the episode where I was essentially recording into the ambient microphone on my laptop, and we jokingly refer to it as me being in a cave, you heard the best version of that, by the way. H did so much to try and salvage that as best as it could be. And yeah, you're always bringing the sound quality here, so no sweat. The show must be for the nookie riding dirty.
Let's start the music. Let's get to the pitches. I believe it's my turn to go first this week. And what I'm going to bring is a turn-based strategy game where you bring all of your mech units. I'm thinking something like an Into the Breach or something like that. Bring all of your mech units that are Tetris-like packed into a transport vessel, and you can choose to bring a lot, but it takes many turns to get them all out of the transport, leaving you vulnerable to losing your entire fleet if they were to just destroy the transport, versus smaller number of units that you can that can make quicker strikes, that can get out there quicker and attack preemptively. And so you got to balance those things. It's more of a pain in the ass to bring more units, but maybe it's worth the extra firepower. So it's not an entire full game. It's just kind of the first move of a game. But I don't know. Let's see where we can take it. I'm going to start the clock there.
You're never going to believe where I'm going to go with this, but may I suggest, I'm always like tilting things towards licensed franchises because we can just do whatever we want here. And here's the license I want to slap on top of this.
It is the monkeys in a barrel.
Finally, the don't break the ice of strategy games. No, here's what I'm thinking. Power Rangers.
Okay.
Okay. Now, in my mind, you have a bunch of different mechs on the field. Let's say the 5 respective Rangers. It doesn't have to be, but I'm so obsessed. I'm pushing it a little bit. And you can kind of combine yourself into the larger vehicle, the Megazord. But if you lose the Megazord, all are lost.
Yeah, so essentially it's the same kind of risk reward of combining to become something more powerful, but putting yourself at risk of a one-hit kill that destroys your entire fleet, essentially.
Yeah, and even if, you could say destroy the arm of the Megazord, maybe that does damage to 3 of the 5, potential combined Zords or whatever. But removing it from Power Rangers for a bit, there's a little bit of StarCraft in here, right? Where you're kind of loading a bunch of Marines into a transport vessel, and then you're kind of trying to send them over to the other side of the map. But if that vessel gets attacked along the way or blown up, you're losing the ship and all the Marines in it. And so the risk reward there kind of maps 1-to-1 to this. So I wonder, like, do you see it as, you're saying like bring more into the battlefield constantly, or is it a set number of units that you're kind of managing through transportation?
If you bring multiple shipments, that just takes more turns, but potentially, you can, I think the main thing that I wanted to focus on, and I'm totally fine with steering away from it. I just wanted to at least iterate the point, in case anybody in the audience had anywhere that they wanted to take it. But the main point that I wanted to bring to it is the kind of Resident Evil inventory screen, like packing everything into a defined space, kind of Tetris-like, and everything is a different shape. And so basically, like, the more that you can creatively fit into a 2D or even a 3D space, then it's almost like that little, not a board game, but like a hand plastic game with all the little car pieces that are, it's like a traffic jam game.
Oh, yeah.
Where you plop them all down and you try to see how many you can fit on the board. I never really played the game, so I don't know if that's the rules, but it always felt a little bit like a puzzle, assembling and disassembling it. Yeah, just this idea of being clever in the way that you pack in your units, not only so that you can fit more in, but also so that they can make a speedy exit from whatever unit they're being transported in.
You know what? There's something also to when you introduce the idea of transportation into the breach or an Advanced Wars like game. I think a lot of interesting things start to crop up in my mind. Like there's a notion of kind of surrounding your enemy and pushing them back, especially in smaller maps and spaces and strategy games. And I love the idea of if you push the enemy back far enough that the enemy can sort of board a vehicle and loop around, and maybe then you're the person that's cornered. Like the idea of there's a train or maybe a vehicle that requires like 2 pressure plates depressed, right? So you actually have to get 2 units on it to make it go. But once those units are on, it'll sort of zip you to the other side of the map, or maybe, around a corner of the map, and you kind of end up in another section. It allows you to get a strategic angle and advantage what would otherwise be a completely cornered situation.
It's like an RTS or a turn-based strategy where there's these points, like subways or portals or something, that you want to not only push the enemy back from your own side of the map, but you also want to keep them away from these certain parts of it. There's a particular strategy in Warcraft 3 that I enjoyed. It was a little bit too complicated to do in actual matches unless you were specifically gearing all of your time and energy to like performing this specifically. So I don't know if it was like actually useful, but if you played the undead, I believe you had a unit that could possess other units or create buildings in another faction's, style, so to speak. And so if you create their hero building, then you can summon their heroes. And there was a particular hero on the Alliance side, I think, who could transport everybody in the immediate vicinity of him to another unit of their own side out on the battlefield. So if you were an undead, you possess this unit, you could use this hero. There was another undead unit that was kind of like a ghost that could turn invisible and just kind of like go anywhere as a scout. And so you could position them right in the middle of the enemy camp and basically teleport your entire army inside of their city.
Oh, yeah.
Which, again, it's too many steps to reliably do in an actual game, but it's just so fun to perform as just like a test of what you can pull off and what you can get away with. And so it's interesting, this idea of, the army suddenly being somewhere where you don't want them to be.
Yeah, I think that's cool. And there's certainly moments in StarCraft and MOBAs, I think a little bit, that play off of that feeling of swapping space and then, surrounding your enemy. But I want to also incorporate rather some of that initial idea of having to group them together. like the risk becomes in the get one, get 'em all sort of feeling of this. And so I wonder if there's an aspect to, imagine if you just took Into the Breach as is, and your mechs could, like if there's one mech that's faster or has longer range, maybe another mech can just jump on that mech's back, and for like 2 turns, like you could potentially defeat both of them just by destroying the original mech, and it like makes the second go critical.
Yeah, you know what would be interesting is if you're fighting a battle in like a city type of scenario. You know, the battle happens above ground, but the really vital stuff is what's happening in the subway. And people can use the subway to transport troops to, you know, elsewhere in the city. But also the subway is what is transporting you resources and goods. And so you need the lines to be running to continue to build units. But you want to keep the enemies away from the terminals, or you want to find chokeholds to block off the cars that are transporting. And so it's kind of like a Trojan horse type scenario. You're trying to keep people from getting into your camp, but you also can't just shut down the line completely. Otherwise, you would be cut off from resources.
I love that. Now we're getting to a little bit of a Heroes of the Storm feeling where you have like one level up top, a second level in the bottom, and maybe somebody... you like push into their zone, you notice there's no hero, like key units over on their side. You go, oh crap, they must be underground. And then you have to like go and realize like what's going on down there. I think that especially if you incorporate the idea of the underground has either limited visibility or there are certain units that can't go above ground or can't go underground, that could be really interesting.
Maybe you have one kind of point of view character that you can send either above ground or below ground. And so you can only be looking at one of the levels at a time. As the enemies are using the subways to transport themselves, then you could either keep a very keen eye on what's going on below ground, or you could be ordering your troops, which are performing presumably the bulk of the expansion into enemy territory. And so, you know, your attention is divided, but both of those planes of existence are equally important in the battle.
Is there a way to kind of combine that with that initial, like, send all your troops? Maybe above ground, you can attack the entrances or exits. And so, like, you can actually effectively cause, like, an entire troop cutoff. So maybe you have one side, right, is like, oh, I'm going to burrow a bunch of troops underground, pop out on the other side, really surprise him. But then your strategy is actually, I'm going to attack all the exits here and actually win by trapping the other enemies inside to kind of wither.
Yeah. Anyways, we're out of time. We've got a lot more to say about that, I'm sure, but at least that's a little nugget of an idea that you guys can continue to innovate on. Anyways, since we've kind of turned this into a Subway type of game here, I guess I'll call it Subway Beat Fresh, because you're trying to beat the enemies until they are fresh, I suppose.
We're not friends anymore.
All right, well, let's move on. Q, what do you have for us today?
Okay, I started playing today something I heard a lot of people talk about, and I didn't know what to make of it from the way they were describing it, but a game called Donut County.
Yes. Right.
You're familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in Donut County, you're kind of playing as a whole. I guess that is kind of like trying to swallow things up, and it's making you grow bigger, sort of Katamari Damacy style. So my pitch today is you're a small morphing changeling creature who has to walk around different environments and kind of create havoc by bumping things and knocking them over and kind of generally ruining a bunch of people's days. But if someone sees you and catches you, you lose. So you actually have just a quick moment where you have access to maybe a limited emoji keyboard, where if someone catches your eye, you have to quickly transform, pick your symbol and transform into something that would look ordinary in that situation. So it's a little changeling person, you're trying to blend in while people are looking at you, but when they're not, you're kind of wreaking havoc. That's my pitch.
All right, starting the clock. So essentially, you're just kind of causing mischief in the environment, and you try to avoid detection, kind of like in the way that Prototype or Destroy All Humans do, by kind of assuming the form of something else that feels right in that situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm figuring that, like, maybe there's something to, like, if you destroy a thing, then, or, you know, you potentially get the ability to turn into it, or there's some mechanic where you have to learn the things you can turn into, but mostly the kind of fun physicsy sort of making people think that there's a ghost in their house or something to that effect.
This is kind of like an interesting spin on the prop hunt. Did you ever play that in Gary's mod?
No.
Okay. You know about Gary's mod though, right?
I do.
Gmod?
Yes.
Okay. Prop hunt was a style of gameplay that became very popular there. It also kind of branched out into any other multiplayer games that you were able to modify. And it was recently kind of resurrected in Prey, where, but anyways, in Gmod originally, you could transform into an environmental object and hide yourself in plain sight, essentially. And it was up to the one player who was a human to go around the environment and try to find the other players.
Yeah, nice.
And so, much like Prey, the recent Prey game, I should say, the remake, not the remake, the reboot that assumed the same name, which I hate.
Prey
as
New.
we've talked about many times before. New Prey, right. Where there are these specific types of aliens that would take on the form of everyday objects, and you would have to kind of utilize knowledge of a space to discern what was not supposed to be there. You know, if there were two clipboards, then you're like, why would somebody need two clipboards here? One of them is obviously an evil alien, which is what I always think when I see things that don't belong in the space.
Anytime I see duplicate anything, I only played a couple hours of Prey, but it immediately instilled that fear of like, what's going on here? I definitely think that that's part of it. I also envisioned this on the phone just because I know a lot of people are going to play Donut County on PC or whatever, but I was playing it on my phone and I loved the feeling of using, you know, at a couple points they have sort of texting and there's an emoji that you can kind of spam in the conversation. And I was like, wow, I really wanted to just use an emoji keyboard. So many games will let you have like limited text-based interaction, but I wonder what the range of expression is with emoji at this point, because it's got to be so vast. There's so many emojis. Some of them are very ridiculous.
So what I'm curious about is this moment between being spotted and putting on your disguise. You know, this is essentially what I think of it as like a red light, green light type scenario, where as long as somebody is turned away, then you're fine to cause as much mischief as you want. But as soon as somebody looks at you, you better change quickly. And assuming there's some level of forgiveness there, you don't have to predict what an NPC is going to do. How immediate do you have to make that choice? Does everything go slow motion, kind of like when you're spotted on Metal Gear Solid 5?
Right.
And you have a moment to react, because there's a ton of emojis and there's a lot to scroll through. And I can imagine trying to find a very specific one. If I was trying to find like the cactus or one of the Japanese characters or something like it, just feels like I would take longer than would be reasonable to give somebody in that type of scenario.
We need to develop bullet time emoji technology. Is that what you're saying?
It's either
you're
too
totally
easy,
right.
too forgiving, or it's too punishing.
Right. Yeah. I think maybe an alternative is like serve up, like they say an average person can only keep 5 to 7 things in their memory at any point. So why don't we do a 4 to 6 emoji keyboard that is not so random, but maybe contains the spectrum from very right to rightish to not so right to wrong, depending on how well you make the choice. Like every choice feels like an immediate, what's right? at this point in the environment quiz, you kind of build up a suspicion meter or something, depending on how well you're answering.
I can see myself getting frustrated with that system if I'm in a desert environment and I have to choose between a cactus and a cloud. Like, obviously the cactus is the right choice, but it's like, well, I mean, a cloud could be there, and so I would feel, if I got it wrong, a little cheated. Like, yay, come on, it's not so bad.
Ooh, okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we, if I divorce it from emoji for a moment, and let's say that you have the ability to turn into one or two different things at a time. And if you do that, then when you do knock something over, you can kind of like suck it up into yourself or like learn about it in the environment. And so if you're going from like an outdoor to indoor space, you have a scenario where at first you're going to want to sort of assimilate things or knock things over in the correct order so that you could become something that looks like a house plant, or something that when you get inside and you're that thing, that the people aren't immediately drawn to you, being like, this is very strange. Why is there a bird or something? Like, people would really pay attention to an animal or something from the outside, but maybe they would pay less attention to something like a delivery package or something like that.
Unless you are in a space like Disneyland, where every step of ground is different from one to the next. You're in Adventureland, then you're in Fantasyland, and then you're in the world of tomorrow, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time kind of wrapping my head around something that does belong in one space but doesn't belong in another, unless it is like a clear indoor to outdoor thing. But even then, it's only really two biomes that you have to account for. So if I'm in a space, I'm thinking like a Katamari level. If I'm in a space and there is, I don't know, like a die on the ground, like a pair of dice or something, and I were to absorb that, go to the other side of the room and knock something over, and then turn into the dice, I don't think somebody would notice that I'm out of place, because something that exists in one corner of the room. Right. So,
yeah, that's a good point.
Like, what can exist in one small space but not exist in the space immediately adjacent to it?
So maybe this tweak is necessary now. Why don't we make it so that you are doing this sort of Katamari-like, it's not even Katamari-like, but you have to take over an object, but once you take over the object, the original is gone. So now you have to sort of always be trying to get to the next thing that someone would potentially not notice. And I guess what I mean by that is you are, if you, let's use a very small example, like a garden. The garden has cucumber plants and strawberries that are planted in it. And if you just get rid of all the strawberries in one go, the person is going to notice. So you either want to bounce between those two, or you want to go from the strawberries to becoming like an inchworm or something. So like, okay, I don't know where the strawberries are, but still nothing quite looks out of place. I'm trying to figure out maybe it's this whole concept of somebody realizing that is messing this up, and it just needs to be, you can only take over something that is size-wise close to what you're currently possessing. And you're kind of going slowly larger up the scale or slowly down the scale. But you have to sort of plot out the order of which you'll absorb things, or you'll end up too big to absorb a smaller thing, or too small to absorb the last big thing.
We're very close to running out of time, but I thought I'd at least throw this last wrench in the mix. Maybe it's not about being noticed, because that does feel very subjective, and it also feels like there would be a very specific order that you would have to tackle each stage in. And so if somebody knew the order, or if they were following a guide, then they would get it right every time.
Yeah.
Okay, so what if, like Katamari, you're trying to get around the world and maybe get bigger or get to a specific spot in the world, but every object that you possess, you can only move in the way that that object would. So if you're a strawberry, you can only roll in a very specific direction and you can't even turn because you're not a perfect circle. And then you can roll into an inchworm, which has a little bit of upward mobility because it can climb up the stalks of sunflowers. And then you get to the top and you're a petal and you can float in the wind and that kind of thing. It all kind of Rube Goldbergs its way together.
I like that. And then it creates a sense of you're now every level is solving a puzzle, and it's a little bit about momentum and like the flow, almost like a very strange take on, gosh, what's that game with all this sort of kinetic movement? EA, very controlled color palette.
Mirror's Edge?
Mirror's Edge. Yes, a very strange Katamari Mirror's Edge prop hunt mashup.
All right, well, let's close the door there. I think we've got more ideas than a single game could take. But let's come up with a name for what we have anyways, and maybe it will continue to evolve. We'll see.
So the original pitch when I was thinking about emoji, I had like emojum, just because that was funny sounding to me. But like I also like something attuned to SimBiology, or...
Because that's almost like SimBiotic as well.
Yeah, I can go with SimBiotic.
Simulacrum. We're going to move now to our community. We have a pitch from Peditis. I struggled with this on Sound of Play this week. So I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name yet. But anyways, thanks for writing in. I appreciate it. The message reads, "Hi guys, first off, I've been listening for a while now and I love the podcast, so keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Now for the pitch. My idea consists of a combination of two words, Stamunition, stamina, and ammunition respectively. This would be an FPS in which you have to manage your movement with the amount of ammo you have, because those two deplete from the same, let's say, bar or whatever indicator is shown on screen. An idea would be to refill your bar when you land shots, and the amount refilled would be determined by how skillful or inventive you were with said shots, which would give it a risk-reward factor, and it would also be nice to find a way to avoid camping or camp posts. But I'll leave it up to you guys to work it out and balance the rest." And we're starting the clock.
Peditis, this is a really cool idea. H, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like at the end he's talking about this being a multiplayer sort of competitive game.
Yeah, sounds like.
I think what's interesting about this to me is Destiny has the concept of sort of a skill shot, or like a particularly accurately placed shot. So a headshot, or maybe it's on a specific point on somebody's body. I like the idea of designing these massive, maybe not massive, but these Quake-like levels, or an Unreal Tournament style first-person shooter level. So bring back some of that design where a lot of the platforming and maneuverability is based off of speed and momentum, but you just need to constantly be gunning people down or engaging in action in order to have the momentum to make so many of those jumps.
This pitch kind of made me think about if stamina was handled in an FPS the same way that it was in a Dark Souls game, where your ability to sprint, maybe your standard movement speed is like very slow and leaves you very vulnerable. And so to get out of danger reliably, you need to be able to sprint, and that drains your stamina bar. But at the same time, so does shooting, in the same way that, slashing with your sword in Dark Souls depletes your stamina bar. And so you're constantly juggling an attack versus a dodge versus a block. And so, you might have this ability to block, and maybe it would be, like you were saying, you can refill your stamina by killing somebody or by performing certain actions, or maybe you just have to let it slowly recharge over time.
What I keep returning to is, for me, in a multiplayer match, especially in a first-person shooter, and I know it doesn't have to be this way, but I think speed ends up erring towards the side of fun. Like, the faster it feels, the more fun it feels. So what if you, similar to many RPG systems, if you had a system where bullets are just heavy, and the more ammo you have, the heavier you are. So if you potentially want to, if somebody's trying to run you down or something, you find yourself just blindly unloading clips into the floor so that you can, run faster than they can. And so if you see somebody who's moving particularly quickly, you
They
could
can't defend
potentially
themselves.
Exactly. So they're defenseless, but they're very fast versus somebody who's like very armored up, or rather bulleted up and is a little bit more of a slug.
That's interesting. I like this a lot. This is going into a very good direction. There is a game called Heavy Bullets, which doesn't function anything like this, and so we're good. We're safe. That's more of a
but they took the
shooter.
best name that we could have.
Well, we'll just have to be creative.
When I think about that sort of speed being tied to that, or the idea of, and I'm not trying to walk away from that previous idea, but I also like the idea of bullets fired are essentially pumping up a meter, like a mana or like a rage meter, but it's building upwards, right? And so the faster you're firing, the sort of faster your movement speed is tied to. So like bullets give you 1 second of movement speed burst, and they can stack up to 40 times or whatever. So you get a bunch of madmen who are like firing blindly and being able to run super, super fast because of it.
Let's say that there's a combination of what you originally pitched of bullets being heavy, and the more you fire, the more you're kind of lightening your load. And also your armor that you're wearing is heavy, and as you get shot, it breaks away. And so you could have a full clip, and if you're near dead, if people have shot you to the point where you basically have no armor left, you're still moving at a pretty quick clip. And if you have a nearly empty gun and you're almost dead, like you're just zipping around the map. And so it gives a little bit more of an escape to people who need it the most, let's say.
That's super cool. So now you have a first-person shooter. You put it on maps maybe that are well designed for momentum and that sort of thing, and then you have the additive feeling of throughout a match, the game gets, instead of like the way an RTS can feel like the game slows down and gets heavier and heavier as like people have larger armies and things kind of become macro instead of micro. Everyone's getting much faster, and it's almost like seeing the game should look almost broken in my mind by the end, where like people are like really whipping around.
Well, then you notice like the people who look the most vulnerable, the people who are moving really slow and stay out in open areas for a long amount of time, because it's hard to run between cover when you're so heavy. Like they're actually the best equipped in a fight. And so if you are low on health or low on ammo and you're moving pretty quickly and you see somebody in your scope who's just barely crawling along, you know that even though I can easily get a few headshots in on him, he might still be able to turn it around and shoot me because I have very little armor left, or maybe I don't have the ammo to take him down, or something. Like there's something interesting about the more obvious enemies being the ones that are harder to kill.
I also love the feeling of so many first-person shooter games that have ammo on the ground. The natural video game proclivity is pick up ammo, always. But I love the idea of, especially if ammo just kind of ambiently snaps to you, if you're too close to it, that like you want to kind of avoid a corner because you're like, there's a bunch of ammo over there, and if I'm running away from someone, I'm going to hit this corner and just pick up, and then just become a turtle by the other side of the current corner.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is a really good like anti-shooter that we're working with now. Maybe there's like secret rooms like you would find in Wolfenstein where there's just a ton of ammo and you can choose to like chase somebody into one of those rooms. Maybe there's a secret entrance. You have to hit a special spot in the wall with your gun to open it up. And as you're chasing somebody in there, you just know that they're going to slow right on down and be a really easy target for you because they're still low on health. There's no armor in that room. It's just ammo.
Yeah, you see somebody go into one of those ammo places and you're just like, if you saw somebody go into one of those places in a regular shooter, you'd say, I'm going to maybe get out of here because this person's about to be totally stacked. But now you're like, oh, perfect. I'm going to camp right outside here. He's going to have all the bullets in the world, but I think I could get him with just a few shots.
This is just extra credit at this point. I feel like we already have a pretty good idea. I feel like I want to find some sort of a punishment for throwing ammo away. Just firing blindly into a wall. Because that's a really easy way to lessen your load. And I want that to be just a little tiny bit risky. Whereas right now on a standard shooter conventions, I don't feel like it would be. Do you get what I'm trying to get at there?
Yeah. Maybe. Okay. Try this on for size. If you shoot a bullet and it hits someone in any way, this is a little bit back to Poditis' original pitch. If it hits somebody in any way, you get some X speed boost. Let's call it a 0.1 is added to your movement speed or whatever that number is. If you shoot and it hits nothing, you get less than half of that. You get a quarter of that. So really the people who are going to be the fastest by the end of the match are the people that have gotten a bunch of successful hits. Even if it's not kills, it's just like pecking away at people. So now you're incentivizing people to shoot each other, but not necessarily too much. It's kind of...
We're bordering on this thing that like a lot of video games do, and I should really just get over it. But for some reason, I have this kind of penchant against rewarding the players who are better already.
Oh, yeah.
And so maybe moving too quickly is actually a detriment because it becomes harder to aim. It becomes harder to really focus in on an enemy that's chasing you. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the person who's fastest at the end of a match, if they are from hitting other people and stuff, it should almost feel like how a very late Tetris level feels, where it is almost running you at that point.
Yeah. Anyways, we're out of time. There's so much to unpack here. This has like actually been one of my favorites in quite a while. I enjoy this one a lot. So I'm sure that there's a lot more we could add to it, and we encourage you to do so in the community. If you have anything to add to that pitch, then feel free to leave a comment on the website, playwrightcast.com. Each episode has its own webpage. Is that what people don't say webpage anymore, do they?
I think so. Why not? Webpage, sure.
Just feels so GeoCities or Angel Fire to say, but
it is the webpage, and you and I are the webmasters.
Oh, geez. We're using web crawler to find our favorite web pages.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that. Anyways, if you have a pitch that you would like to submit to us to mull over and eventually be stumped by, then you can submit that to playwrightcast.com/pitch. You can email us at playwrightcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet at us at playwrightcast. And in all of those instances, it is PLAYWRITECAST.
Special thank you to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World. Hey, we should get PROTODOME to score this Poditis game. I think it's going to be very, very good. By the way, did we ever name the game?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Well, let's go with Stamunition. I think it's great.
I feel like Poditis gave us a very good lead there. So,
okay. So special thank you to PROTODOME, the mastermind behind the Stamunition soundtrack and the composer of our theme song, Hello World, off the album Blue Noise. It's very good. Go give it a listen.
To leave us off on an interesting idea, just to chew on a little bit today, I want a game that can only be played by cycling in and out of a console's home menu.
Oh, God. Xbox, here we come.
Be the worst game, especially on Xbox. The thing takes minutes to load its home menu.
Hey, my X runs great.
My X does not, so I don't know what you're feeding yours, but obviously Blu-ray copies of UHF by Weird Al Yankovic is not the thing that it needs to run smoothly.
It's slowing you down.
All right, well, we'll see you next week.
Bye.